Thank you so much, Joe, and everyone for that warm welcome. I have to say, even I have emailed redcap@iu.edu, and I can tell you they do have a great response time. So I'm Stephany Duda. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. This is my first time ever at IU, and your campus is gorgeous. I walked here from the hotel this morning. It's like a nice 15-minute walk before the rainstorm came in, and everything is beautiful, pedestrian friendly, so green and open. It was lovely, and I definitely hope I'll get a chance to come back. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about REDCap, its history, and the work it has done transforming our research globally. So I have the challenge today of controlling separately the slides on my laptop, which I can read with my bad eyesight, and the clicker for the slides behind me. So I'm counting on all of you to help me out in case I advance these ones and I forget those ones. And the things I'm saying just don't match up with what I'm showing. So just wave at me or something. So I traveled up here from Nashville yesterday. As I'm sure some of you know, it's a beautiful 4-hour drive straight shot up 65. I work at Vanderbilt in Nashville in the Department of Biomedical Informatics. And the work I do is clinical research informatics with global health applications. So I work with a lot of international teams on HIV and tuberculosis research, as well as other collaborations. The cool thing is this type of work involves a lot of travel. In the past 2 months, I've been to Portugal and France and Cameroon and Cote d'Ivoire and Argentina. The bad news is that this work involves a lot of travel. And sitting in a small economy seat on a plane for 15 hours is not so great. And getting sick in countries when you don't know how to ask for cough drops in French is also really challenging. So don't romanticize it, but means it's especially exciting for me to come up here. I got to be in a comfortable car. And because I have so many collaborations with many of you here at IU, even though I've never been to this campus or this building before, it feels like I'm coming home. So thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to be here today. I also work a lot with the REDCap team at Vanderbilt, and that's part of the reason that I'm here. Back in the old days, I even tinkered around with some REDCap programming myself, though my programming is very outdated nowadays. So let's see, we have a picture here on the right. How many of you recognize this building in Nashville? I see a few hands raised, yes. This is the Parthenon in Nashville. It's a full-scale replica of the Parthenon in Athens. Some of my Greek colleagues say this is a travesty, you know? How could you build this replica of our beautiful marble historic work? And I say, well, you know, ours has a roof. But next time that you're in Nashville, click. Maybe I did not get lucky. Maybe I should just migrate down to the, oh, yeah, if you don't mind. Sorry, a little bit technical difficulties. Our clicker stopped working. No? Oh, here we go. Yes, thank you. Yes. Okay, super. So next time when you are in Nashville and you go to visit the Parthenon, which you'll see here in this picture on the left, I want you to just turn around and look the other way across the lawn. And you may see another famous building, which is just a regular academic Vanderbilt building, but it is the home of REDCap. These are the offices of our REDCap team in this academic building straight across the way from the Parthenon. So you'll know where to find us. Just in case, I know I'm in a room of REDCap experts here, but just in case anybody is here to learn about REDCap for the first time, and I hope there are a few of you, I wanted to make sure I included a slide about what REDCap is. So as you know, it stands for Research Electronic Data Capture. It's a secure web-based data collection software that lets you design forms, enter the data, export spreadsheets. And I teach a lot of students, and they always say to me, why should I spend time learning REDCap? And I say to them, sure, it's a widely used piece of software for health research, and it simplifies your data collection workflow. It's a secure method for handling your research data. But also, you can build a career on REDCap. We have a lot of REDCap needs in our research enterprise. And if you learn how to use REDCap, it will serve you well because you will know and understand all the important concepts if you encounter any other type of data collection software in the future. So what are the different ways that you can collect data in REDCap? Sure, many of us have entered data through the secure web interface that you log in to access, or maybe you've entered data into REDCap surveys. And then depending on how your REDCap server is set up, you may have access to some of these other ways to collect data in REDCap, including text messaging. So REDCap will call you on the phone and say, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? Press 1 for vanilla, press 2 for chocolate, press 3 for strawberry. That's the phone call option. We also have 2 mobile apps. One is the REDCap mobile app for data collectors and the MyCap mobile app that's patient-facing. And then at Vanderbilt, we've recently set up a new feature in REDCap that allows you to pull data directly from the electronic health record of our hospital into our REDCap system. It's saved a lot of time, and I know other groups around the country are slowly beginning to implement this as well. So what are ways that people use REDCap? Here are just a few examples. In one of the research collaborations I work with called IDEA, we've had an observational study of persons with tuberculosis. It's a longitudinal study with multiple points of contact with these participants over the 2-year period as they take their tuberculosis medications. We've also used REDCap for collecting documents for a conference registration like this. Last year, we had a conference in India for the TB Report Consortium, and all of us had to get letters of invitation from the government in order to attend this meeting. And to do that, we had to submit scans of our passports. That's not really something that you want to upload in a Google form. So we created a REDCap form, and people were comfortable knowing that they were uploading the scan of their passport to a secure environment, and that after everything was processed and these letters of invitation were sent out, that we would be deleting the information. I also surprisingly have gotten a REDCap survey from the Nashville Metro Health Department saying, did you eat at one of these 3 restaurants in the past month? So they use it for foodborne illness tracking. We've also had REDCap used for conference survey feedback. Our graduate students at Vanderbilt decided to come up with their own survey on student well-being, and they run it every semester. We use it for IRB reviews at Vanderbilt, and surprisingly, fire departments around the country have started requesting access to REDCap to monitor naloxone administration because they want to follow up with people who have received naloxone and hopefully connect them to mental health services within 48 hours. And REDCap helps them have a tracking system to collect this type of information. So the story of REDCap begins in 2004. And if you think about it, that was a pretty long time ago. I wanted to include a few pictures here so all of us can remember and position ourselves back there in time. Mark Zuckerberg was launching a platform that you may have heard of. At the time, it was called the Facebook. Gmail had just launched their beta. NASA's Spirit and Opportunity rovers landed on Mars. We had a collection of movies and television shows that we still kind of follow today. And the Athens Olympics, or the Summer Olympics, had just returned to Athens, which was a big deal. Meanwhile, in the clinical research world was a new piece of US regulation called HIPAA. And enforcement was beginning in 2004. It meant that you had to inform patients about how their data were going to be used for research. You had to track who was accessing those data to make sure you had good procedures for de-identifying the data and data security. And at this time, most investigators were still using Excel. So Vanderbilt was not ready. We were terrified because the fines were pretty huge. And it wasn't that our researchers were actively making poor decisions. It was just that they had no good alternatives. So they weren't actively ignoring the security rules that HIPAA was now encouraging or imposing upon us, but they didn't have the tools necessary to obey these regulations. We found we had thousands of active research projects at Vanderbilt, and all of the projects were very different. What if we sat down and we coded a new data collection system for each one of these projects? We made a Microsoft Access database. Could we do that? It turned out we could not hire enough programmers to make a data collection system for each one of the software projects running at Vanderbilt. So how are we going to address this? We figured researchers, sure, they will do the right thing. They will secure their data. They will implement audit trails as long as we provide them with the right tools. So those tools had to be free. Those tools had to be easy to use and could not place additional burden on their research team. That is what led to the creation of REDCap. The idea behind REDCap was to have this metadata-driven application, and all that means is that your forms are created by your data dictionary. So you design the data dictionary, the program reads it, and automatically generates your forms. REDCap was invented and the original version was implemented by Dr. Paul Harris, who is still with us at Vanderbilt today and leads the REDCap team. He launched the first version of REDCap in 2004. And it was pretty different from the REDCap that we're used to seeing today. You could only create a new project by filling out a CSV data dictionary, and then you'd email that CSV to Dr. Harris, and he would import it into his magical tool, and voila, you would have a project. So there were many more steps in the process than we have today. So after launching one REDCap project, he said, this might work, but we still had thousands of projects at Vanderbilt that needed a tool that was like this. So Dr. Harris began to meet with research teams at Vanderbilt across the campus, and he asked them, tell me about your research. And then he said, you know what? Let me tell you about this tool that I have. Would you be interested in this to help facilitate your data collection? And for the most part, they said, yeah, I think that could work for me. And he said, well, great. Here's what you need to do. And they said, wait, let me just send you my forms and you can take care of everything. You can implement that for me. And he said, no, we're going to follow a different model. You just take 10 minutes, 10 minutes in the next 48 hours, and look at your forms, and you try to put your forms into the CSV template and then just send it back to me. And for research teams that were able to iterate on this quickly, he was able to have a data collection interface up within 48 hours. And they bought into the idea of REDCap. The users of the initial 20 REDCap projects said that it helped to make their science better. I was slow. I was only user number 59. So we found that our goals were accomplished at REDCap, at Vanderbilt, that the new REDCap software helped researchers adhere to best practices. The workflow for building projects now included all research team members, not just the study coordinator, but the PI had to take a look at these forms as well, and you wanted to check with the biostatistician to make sure that the variable naming made sense. We helped researchers identify downstream issues because they had to work methodically through these different steps. And REDCap ultimately, didn't make it impossible to design a bad study, but it made it harder because you had a more official workflow. So I wanted to show you a very old REDCap project that I had. So this was REDCap project number 147 on our REDCap server. It was a global survey for the IDEA Consortium, and its goal was to assess the characteristics of and the services provided at different HIV clinics that were participating in this IDEA Consortium around the world. There were 153 different clinics, and we needed the survey in English, French, and Spanish. But the early version of REDCap didn't have all these features that we're used to today. It certainly didn't have the multi-language module. So we had to set up 3 different projects, one in each language. It didn't even have survey features. So we had to make sure everybody had a login to enter their data. It didn't have data access groups necessarily. So we said, make sure you don't touch somebody else's data over there. And it didn't have checkboxes. That is such a standard feature that we take for granted nowadays. So this is what the REDCap project looked like, because it still works today without checkboxes. We had to use single radio buttons for each variable. So how is malaria diagnosed at this facility? Choose the correct responses. You could have multiple, and you have these single radio buttons. And we did have branching logic. So the other option here does pop up the text box that you see below. And what you see here in the screenshot, of course, is the old project in our new interface. We didn't have nearly as many links and buttons in REDCap back then because we didn't have as many features. So over time, REDCap has grown so much more complicated. It's a lot to learn now. But even back then, even missing all of these features that we take for granted, we were able to have a successful data collection at 144 of the sites. 9 of them didn't respond. But this led to multiple research papers that used the data. So here are our system statistics from this week on our Vanderbilt server. We have a total of 132,000 REDCap projects in production and 54,000 users, active users. The map here shows you where people are logging into our Vanderbilt REDCap from. So you can see we have international research collaborations because people are logging into our Vanderbilt REDCap from Brazil, from Australia. And these spikes here and the graph on the bottom just shows that everybody gets really busy in REDCap at lunchtime and not so much on the weekends. So sure, REDCap had a successful trajectory at Vanderbilt, but how did we grow beyond Vanderbilt? So we're going back in time again to 2006. Dr. Harris was at a research conference. He was presenting a poster about this tool that he had built. And another researcher came up to him from the University of Puerto Rico and said, "This piece of software you developed, this seems really useful. Can I have a copy?" And Dr. Harris said, it's going to take a little bit of work to make sure that our software can be moved to a different environment. Like, it runs great at Vanderbilt right now, but to move it to somebody else's server is going to take some work. So could you give me 5% of a software developer and we'll work together and get this code package ready to be installed at your university? And Dr. Conde said, "You know what? I have a great software developer and I'll give you 30% of his time." And they became the first REDCap partner at the University of Puerto Rico and developed REDCap together. And in 2007, a few other universities started saying, this could be useful for us. Let's join a consortium. And who joined in 2008 as one of the 25th members of the REDCap consortium, which, as you heard, has now over 7,000 members? Indiana University. You have been one of the founding members of the REDCap consortium. Your input for all of these years has helped feed into REDCap, develop REDCap to be the software that it is today. So by 2009, we had 27 partners who were running REDCap. You can see this very old map here, and we published a paper about REDCap, which is the picture that you'll see here on the left. We'll get back to this paper later on, but this paper is where this map is featured and shows you the individual sites. Then by 2011, we had over 200 REDCap partners. And I don't have a map back then, but Dr. Harris does have this coffee mug. And it has a map on it that shows you some red dots where the REDCap partner sites were. And at this point, we released REDCap version 4.0. And then in 2013, something very interesting started happening with the REDCap consortium and different universities joining into this REDCap collaboration. So as you can see here, in 2013, the number of US and international partners really switches. And instead of having more domestic partners joining REDCap every year, we started to have more international partners. And they had new requests for this software. We need a way to translate the interface. We need a way to switch the text direction. We need both left to right and right to left. We need different punctuation for our decimal points. We need different data export formats. And all of their input helps to bring new features into the REDCap software. So you have a sense that REDCap keeps growing. And with all of these international partners, now we're pretty much on every continent, right? Well, we're not quite in Antarctica yet, but in 2021, the Australian Antarctic program became a REDCap partner, and they have several research stations in Antarctica. And so I'm hoping that they're using REDCap there for penguin research. We also got a contact from NASA, but fingers crossed, I'm still waiting to hear. So this is REDCap today. You just saw a version of this map a few minutes ago. You can see all the little dots here represent the growth of REDCap around the world, with over 3 million users and a community that all of you are part of. If you're interested in learning more about the REDCap consortium and how it changed over time, there's another paper that you can take a look at that's about the REDCap consortium and the change in US and international partners and how the REDCap consortium grew from just Vanderbilt to the large group that we are now. So how is REDCap been useful for all of these global partners? Sometimes it can be really hard to quantify the scientific impact, but we'll take a look at a few things. I don't know if any of you have ever played around with Web of Science. I find the interface a little bit hard to use, but they've got these fantastic visualizations. So if you go to the original REDCap paper, it's been cited over 30,000 times. And Web of Science maintains these categories that every paper falls into. So this is the breakdown of all 30,000 papers that have cited REDCap according to the areas that they have been published in. Pediatrics, which is this light green box on the left, that used to be the #1 category until about 2020. And now you see public, environmental, and occupational health is #1. And a lot of the work that I do, I think, falls into the infectious disease box that is smack in the middle in orange. And also at the very bottom right, there's a small little lilac box maybe that says medical informatics. REDCap is also used pretty broadly in these large research programs, both US and global. The All of Us study that is aiming to collect data and specimens on 1 million people living in the US, they use REDCap. The ECHO pediatric study uses REDCap. The H3 Africa study, which has now grown into the DSI Africa Consortium, a massive data collection across the entire African continent, they use REDCap. We've also had REDCap used in a number of COVID consortiums like Recover and the Active-6 trials. The Report Tuberculosis Consortium is another example, and of course the IDEA HIV Consortium that I mentioned earlier, all using REDCap data collections. So an example from one of these, and I'll be pulling examples from IDEA only because that's one of the consortia that I work with a lot. But I've seen so many examples of REDCap teams helping each other across the world. So in IDEA, a couple years ago, they started a project on non-communicable diseases in adults with HIV. Everybody agreed to use REDCap for the data collection. And then researchers in New York, in Eldoret in Kenya, in Cape Town, in Rio, in Nashville, and here at IU, all participated in developing the first draft of the data dictionary. Then the researchers in Nashville sent the data dictionary to Mexico. The team in Mexico translated it into Spanish and sent it on to participating sites in Honduras, Peru, and Chile. We also sent it to our research partners in Cameroon. They translated it into French and sent it on to Côte d'Ivoire and to Haiti. So at the end of this process, the study had data dictionaries in 5 different languages installed on 5 different REDCap servers because we couldn't centralize everything at Vanderbilt because of national data privacy laws. And the data dictionaries and the whole project was developed collaboratively by these colleagues from over 15 different countries. Without REDCap, that type of collaboration would be much harder. And it's providing a new level of standardized data collection for these studies. But maybe even more exciting is that the World Health Organization became a REDCap partner in 2021. They were really helped out in this process a lot by the Pan American Health Organization, which is like WHO's little brother that just addresses North and South America. And PAHO had been a REDCap partner for at least 10 years. So when WHO came along, PAHO said, we'll help you through the licensing process. We'll share our knowledge about server setup. And the WHO was able to get started with REDCap pretty quickly. It turns out they used REDCap for their global clinical platform for COVID-19. So WHO runs a REDCap server, and one of the projects will collect patient-level anonymized clinical data from countries around the world. Another impactful project that used REDCap was in Brazil. There is an HIV drug called dolutegravir that came out relatively recently. And it was lauded as a fantastic innovation because it has so many fewer side effects than previous drugs. And the WHO said, wonderful, let's try to get all the patients switched to new treatment regimens that include dolutegravir. But then a birth surveillance program in Botswana said, wait, based on our data, dolutegravir might be associated with neural tube defects in newborn babies. And suddenly there was a global concern. WHO issued a safety signal in May of 2018 that said, please consider not prescribing this for women of childbearing age because we don't know if it can lead to neural tube defects. But countries around the world had already started prescribing dolutegravir in their HIV treatment regimens. And one of those countries was Brazil. Brazil said, you know what? We have a national HIV program that gives everybody free medical treatment. We also have a database that tracks who is on dolutegravir and which one of the women have been pregnant. So let's take a look at the outcomes of these women as they have been on dolutegravir. So the Brazil team developed a REDCap mobile app. In a very short time period, they pulled together 100 data collectors and trained them in an intensive 2-day training. They had an 80-page user manual. It was very nicely printed on some slick paper. And they sent these data collectors across the entire country, not just to the big cities like Rio or Sao Paulo. There were data collectors on boats going into the Amazon. So this is a picture I asked Dolly to create, as I don't have an actual one. And they conducted pregnancy follow-ups on 2,500 women. And they found no risk for neural tube defects in newborn babies in their data set. And together with other research that happened around the world that was then presented to WHO, 1 year later, WHO recommended that DTG be made available to everybody again. So this is an investigation that happened on a very quick timeline that wouldn't have been possible without REDCap. I asked their team afterwards, 100 different data collectors with tablets, like something must have gone wrong, right? Like, tell me what went wrong. And they said nothing went wrong. Everything went very smoothly. And that was a wonderful story to hear. I also asked if I could tell you this story. Did you know that REDCap was used for the Oxford COVID-19 vaccine development? Most of the time when large vaccines are developed, they use commercial data collection systems. But the team at Oxford said, we have access to some of these commercial systems, but the group that we trust is the REDCap community. We know that if we have questions, we can solve them quickly by working with the REDCap community. And they decided to conduct these massive vaccine trials using REDCap for all of the forms that you see here in the blue box, from e-consent to their trial database, patient diaries for symptoms, exposure to COVID, suspected cases, adverse events, as well as a couple additional databases like vaccine information and patient unblinding. All of this was implemented in REDCap. And the director of this project, Dr. Yama Farouk Mujadidi, said that this data collection helped them obtain much cleaner data. They were able to involve a team of maybe 8 data managers who supervised the data at all times. And REDCap was a very customizable interface so that they could deliver what was needed for these studies. And what they ended up with was a 1-year timeline for the vaccine development. And you can see here in this timeline the different trial stages that REDCap played a part in. So REDCap at its heart is about working together. Even as a tool, REDCap is a piece of software, but it's also about all of us working together as a community to do research. Thank you. Look at this. I forgot this one. So here on this slide, you can see REDCap on these two phases of the trial. And this is our diagram for working together. So REDCap is a piece of software that you can see here on the blue side of this loop. The REDCap development team that I work with, we receive suggestions and feedback from all of you. We're not just building a piece of software in a vacuum. We're trying to build tools that really make a difference to the research that we all are engaged in every day. And that doesn't just mean studies. It means all of the operations that happen around research, that happen with managing academic centers, all of the operational and quality improvement uses that you can put REDCap to as well. And in turn, we hope that this piece of software can empower you to do the work that you want to do and accomplish the science that you envision. We are always available for any suggestions and feedback, and I hope I'll have a chance to talk with many of you today. So thank you again so much for inviting me, and thank you for being here for REDCap Day.
Can you hear me now? Yes, great. Dr. Duda, thank you so much. We have about 4 or 5 minutes if you would like to take questions. Is that okay?
I'd be happy to.
Do we have any questions in the room or any questions on set? Oh, I get to run all the way over here. Hang on. So we must use a microphone. We have over 70 people on Zoom. Hello, people on Zoom.
Hello to everyone on Zoom.
Thank you for that awesome background on REDCap. Really great. Thank you. Talk a little bit about the e-diary. I'm not familiar with that. Is that a feature or?
It's not an official feature. It's something that they built themselves within REDCap with a series of repeating forms, longitudinal forms, and reminders that were sent out to participants. But I have heard from a few people that they would love to have a diary feature in REDCap. So I'll collect that as another piece of information.
Great. Other questions in the room? Or if you're on Zoom, you can unmute or you can type your question in the Zoom chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you that way. Any other questions in the room?
Well, I hope all of your technical questions will be answered by the wonderful sessions this afternoon. So no questions online?
Yeah. Well, let's thank our speaker again. Thank you so much.